The way I usually do it is something like that. And I think they have 315. Yeah. So, okay. Huh? I see. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, oops. It's 4:20 and we have an hour. So I want to get started if you don't mind. So let me start with a walkthrough of kind of where we're at, we being the IAOC and the IAOC Meetings Committee, with respect to a process for figuring out where we meet over the next few years, and kind of walk through the document and then walk through discussion that we've had on the list. We've got several things going on today. So our problem statement, what we're dealing with right now is that we have had for a number of years meeting venue selection criteria. They have not been on a public website, they've been on a private website, but we have kind of a checklist. And after each IETF meeting, there is usually a flame fest on with the whatever attendee list to the effect of those idiots sent us somewhere again. And okay, so we're the idiots, and we'd like to talk with you about the criteria by which we select venues and get your input on that. Okay, so we've posted an internet draft. We're collecting comments on it, and at the end of it, you know, we'll figure out what we're doing. So our agenda today is I'm going to talk for a few minutes. I'm obviously already talking. I'll discuss the draft. When we were going through the draft, we kept saying, so this is mandatory, that's mandatory, the other thing is mandatory. And I would hear a gasp at the other end of the phone from the lady who had to carry it out. And we're going to get her to come up and talk about the analysis that she did about how that would affect our venues and, you know, where we might have had trouble in the past, or, you know, that kind of thing. And then walk through literally the comments that we've had on the list. And in that, we're very interested in your viewpoints and in your comments. I want to start out, though, by addressing the discussion that we had last night that Ted started in the plenary last night. We heard you. We are actively figuring out what the law actually is in Singapore and how it affects us, and what we should do next. We're not at this point ready to comment to the community about that, but if you're here to talk about that, message received. We're working on it, believe me. We try very hard to address everybody's needs, and we obviously missed one. Okay, so what is our objective in this meeting? We want to listen to you. We want to walk through what we do. We want to listen to you. We want to finish this process in the hour that we have available. If we don't finish in the hour that we have available, the meeting that's coming in right after us will probably trample us or something. So we won't be re-engineering the document in real time. What we will be doing is accepting comments. Okay, everybody got that clear? Okay, good. So now, who is the IAOC and who is on the meeting committee? Let me just give you an idea of who that is. These are people that we have known and put in positions of trust and responsibility over a period of 20 years or more. Okay, so Leslie Daigle is the IAOC chair. Yari is the IETF chair. Kathy Brown is the ISOC president and CEO. Ray, well, we hired him, but yeah, okay. And we've got a NOMCOM appointee. We've got an appointee from the ISOC board, from the IAB and the ISG. So we have a number of people that that we have worked with over a long period of time in the IOC. On the meeting committee, we have 4 members of the community. We all happen to be former IAOC members that stuck around after our positions on the IAOC ended. But all we are really is random members of the community. We have Lou Berger, who was appointed by the IAOC, and Tobias, how do you pronounce your name? Gondrum, who was appointed by the IAOC and asked to be on our team. Jim Martin, who's from the NOC team. He goes out every time we look at a site and asks himself, could I actually put an IETF network together here? And sometimes he comes back with no. So we depend on him quite a bit for the technical end of things. So Ray, of course, is involved in that as well. And we have 5 people, including one of the principals from AMS, who are the contractor for the Secretariat. Okay, so these are the people that we have doing this work. And one question that we are asking the IAOC is, do we need more community members, and who would those be? In order to make sure that we're reflecting the views of the community. But that's where we are today. Now, the document that I posted, let me ask, how many people have read the document that I posted? Okay, actually quite a few of the people in the room. That's good. That's good, if nothing else, because it means that I don't have to read you the document. But I will kind of walk through the comments that have been made. And I have slides that are, we can use as backup. That's for when we get to specific things in there. But so the outline of the thing, basically today I'm going through section 3, which is the process that we go through and the different set of criteria that we evaluate things on the basis of. And understand that we're not claiming they're perfect. Part of the question here is, what do we need to add? What do we need to change? Did we get the words wrong? Okay. But so this is the outline of the document and what we'll go through. You already read the document, so instead of sitting down and saying, okay, so the document says this, what I'm going to do is, Laura, where are you? Laura, what? You think we ought to do that? Okay, so I'll bring you up in a minute. Okay, so we start out with a section in the document in which we talk about the principles on which we base our selections. And those principles actually are sometimes surprising to people that we ask to host or cities that we want to go to. So who are we? Well, we're a multiple disciplinary group that is trying to improve the internet. Why are we here and why do we meet? In part to discuss and advance internet drafts, but the purpose of those internet drafts then is to improve the internet. Where do we meet? Well, we meet wherever our people come from, which right now is primarily in the Northern Hemisphere and located in Eastern Asia, in Western Europe, and in North America. Of course, one of the questions becomes, we actually do have people from the Southern Hemisphere. Some of them live here. And you know, we have people that are in Australia and other places as well. So we meet globally. And why do we do that? Basically to try to be fair. If you're involved in the IETF, we would like to have a meeting near you every so often. You know, I can't promise that, of course, but that's what we try to do. Inclusiveness, we want to facilitate participation by everybody. That's why we have Meet Echo. That's why we come into open conference centers. You don't have to show your passport when you walk into a meeting room. I've been to places like that. The point is to be inclusionary. One of the big issues that has been discussed on the IETF list is the quality and nature of our internet access. We state here that we depend on the internet and we use the internet. Not only are we working on its problems, but we're using it in order to accomplish our work. And as a result, we need access to the network to facilitate that. We try to meet in places where we can focus and where we can work. We try to avoid noisy places and that kind of thing. And we try to make it be reasonably economical within the limits of what we can actually achieve. It's not perfect, but you know, we do try to make it achievable. I guess I don't need to know about that. Okay. So those are the principles that we follow. Did I miss a principle? Did I miss a principle? Okay. Now then, our objectives, obviously we're advancing standards development. That's what we do. We're facilitating participation by our active contributors. And I want to be careful in saying it's our active contributors. If somebody is, we get requests, could we please go to some place? If we were to meet in Lower Slobovia, maybe somebody from Lower Slobovia would care, and we could now have participation from Lower Slobovia. And you know what? If they're not involved, I don't care about Lower Slobovia. We're trying to facilitate involvement of our active contributors and share the travel pain. Travel pain and expense. You know, I don't know about the rest of you. My airplane ticket to come here costs twice as much as what it usually does for an IETF meeting, even when it's in Europe or Asia. And I'm sure many of our participants have essentially that experience. Now, if they're coming from Asia and going to Europe, all of a sudden it's an expensive ticket. We try to make it so that over a period of time, everybody has about the same impact on their wallet. And again, we can't make that perfect, but we try. And as much as I said, you know, if somebody really isn't involved, they're not a target market for me. At the same time, I do want to encourage new contributors. Why do I want to encourage new contributors? Well, often they have good ideas or they understand problems that I don't realize are there yet. And I need to hear them. I need to understand what they have to say, and I need to understand the solutions that they would propose. And then there's another, frankly, very pragmatic issue. How many of us have gray hair? You know, sooner or later, we're leaving, and there better be somebody here when we do. And so we want to make sure that we have an infusion of fresh blood over a period of time. Now that the continental rotation, which we do, the continental rotation that we do nominally because the ISG asked us to. That they set up a policy that said we visit those three major northern hemisphere regions in something resembling a rotation. The chair can also insert a meeting in that cycle. And Yari inserted this meeting in 2000. I inserted a meeting in Adelaide. The chair can insert meetings in that cycle in places that are, other than here, or other than in the cycle. And the general comment that we would make to those that would like to change that rotation is change our demographics. Start building participation and documents and people on the chairing working groups and ADs and IAB members from your region. Europe did that in the late 90s. Japan and China have done that in the early 2000s. I had a meeting with Dawit Bekele, who is the regional director, is that what they call him, for Africa, for the Internet Society. He's very actively working to increase capacity in Africa. And at some point, we're probably going to want to have a meeting in Africa. But the point isn't the meeting. The point is increasing capacity and getting new thought, new so on coming from Africa. And obviously, we're interested in Latin America. We're here. So before I move on to another slide, Aaron, you look like you have something to say.
Hi, Aaron Falk, Akamai. I liked your document, and I'm trying to provide useful input at the risk of sounding like I am nitpicking, and so please don't take it that way. But I'm thinking this through. I think that we've had enormous success at this IETF, more than any other that I can remember, with the remote participation. But I feel like you do lose something with remote participation. And I think that the ordering of some of these objectives or the principles may be important, because I think that it's easy to agree with all of them, but sometimes when they're in competition, some guidance on preference is called for. And so I guess I would like to see something that had a preference for face-to-face interaction over virtual interaction without sacrificing the ability for remote participation, because I think it's important. It's how we have a broader reach. But I think we would lose a lot if we went to an all virtual meeting, if we took this out to its logical extreme. And because there's nothing in here about sort of that preference, I think it might be worth trying to put some words in somewhere.
Comment here. Okay, thank you. I personally agree with you. I don't claim to speak for anybody besides me, but I personally agree with you. Personally, I find remote participation in meetings far easier if I have seen the person face to face, if I've taken them to dinner, if I've shaken their hand. And so to me, having the face-to-face meetings is important to create the relationships, even if in the future I'm going to be remote. By the way, I don't want at this point to have a lot of people at the mic, because later on I'm actually going to back up and go through comments and ask people to comment on the mic. I'm trying to go quickly through the document. So Lou and Randy, fine, but let's stop with the two of you, okay?
Lou Berger, I was going to channel Jabber. What do you want to do with Jabber?
Sure, fine.
Okay. So Barry said that no one is asking me to channel Jabber. It's my experience with Jabber. I channel everything that's written there. Apparently Barry doesn't want to do that. You're the chair. Do you want me to read it or not?
Read it.
Thank you. Sorry, lost it. With this logic, it is not probable we will ever have an IETF in Africa. That's someone with initials but didn't identify themselves farther. We weren't going to have one in China either. Then we got enough of a participant base and sponsor, and we went there. I believe that was Barry. China is a country, not a continent. I'm not sure who these next ones are from. When the decision to go to China was made, that was a very clear vector of increasing participation happening. Also, China had some initial concerns about free speech, and we had to threaten to not have the meeting there in order to break through that. Dave, indeed, and That could happen with Africa. I agree with Fred, face-to-face is a key prerequisite to better remote participation, +1. And I guess I'll not come back and channel jabber anymore.
Okay, thank you. Randy?
Randy Bush, IJ. I don't disagree with any of these points, but they are microengineering. What we have clearly demonstrated is a process that doesn't work. It's had a failure, okay? And no blame. Luckily, I never make mistakes, okay? But I hate to agree with John Clenson, but the transparency will fix this. The suggestion on the list of these are all
Okay,
nice
let's take this
criteria.
comment later. Let's take this comment later. I'm trying to go quickly through the document. Okay, so this is what we've got in the document. This is what we're trying to achieve with our objectives. Now, one of the things that we do, the IAOC, in 4 years in advance of a certain date, tells us what continents they would like to have meetings on in any given meetings place in a cycle. And we now have to implement that. That's our job, is to implement that in terms of selecting cities on those continents. How do we select those cities? Well, we look at them. We look at them really hard, and we ask questions about them. We haven't been to a particular city that I won't name because John Clenson told me in 1997 that they had a crime problem, and we've never gone to that particular city. We, look at a variety of different things. We try to figure out travel costs. We try to figure out barriers to entry. There are quite a number of countries in the world that have a problem with the nation of Israel. And we wind up having difficulty finding places that we can have meetings in those places. We look at health risks. We looked very hard at the Zika virus coming here. We look for hosts and sponsors. Frankly, if we can find a host or a sponsor, that's going to affect what city we go to very strongly. If we can't find a host or a sponsor, then we might find ourselves going to another country or something like that. Those are things that we consider mandatory. We have to go after those. We have some other things that we'd like to achieve that we often don't. So if we've had a prior good experience in a meeting, we're interested in that. That might be a reason to come back. So we've had several meetings in Minneapolis, for example. And then we look at the possibilities of a multi-event contract. That often allows us to reduce our expenses. And we're trying to keep the cost down. So when we look at cities, we're looking kind of at those kinds of issues and asking ourselves whether it's a reasonable city. Given, that we decide that a city might be a reasonable place, the next thing we're going to ask is, could we have a meeting there? Is there a building that has a room like this and 9 buildings that are half this size that we can actually have an IETF meeting in? What does the network in that place look like? If it's acceptable, fine. If it's not acceptable, can we build one? And in the past, we have often built a network within a hotel or within a conference center. Increasingly, we're finding that we only have to tweak it, which is a good thing. We like that. We look at the cost of rooms. We look at the cost of meeting space, food and beverage issues. We look at, I can think of a particular meeting where the discussion after the meeting was people could not find a halal restaurant. Okay, we ask ourselves, is there a halal restaurant there? We try to cover kind of as many issues as we can think of. Now, under the desirable column, gee, we'd like to have it all in one facility if we can. You notice that this particular facility, which, if you think I'm wrong, we need to know this, but I think the facility has actually worked pretty well. But we could only get 350 rooms. This is not exactly under one roof. So, I mean, we try to go for a one roof kind of an environment. We often find ourselves having to pull in other hotels and other places to look at things. And we concern ourselves with people with disabilities. We have a person here this week that is running around in a wheelchair. We often have a person who is blind and needs to be led. We have people with hearing issues. I have a problem right now. My hearing aid stopped working this morning, and I hear a big echo from the room. Okay, so right now it's kind of hard for me to hear. We're concerned about that. So we're looking at the question of, can we have a productive meeting in the facility? Is there a place that we can do that? Technical services, and this tends to be very, very much Jim Martin's baby. In fact, he wrote the text. We want to know about the network. We want to know what the speed of it is going to be. We'd like to have the IETF network in every hotel that we stay in. We often don't achieve that. I guarantee in the hotel that I'm in, which is the Holiday Inn, we're using the hotel network and it's nowhere near as good. Sorry. But we try to deliver a high performance, both wireless and wired network for the facility. So, and like I say, desirable. We'd like to put the IETF SSID in every hotel that we have people staying in. Now, speaking of hotels, guess what? We're not too crazy about cockroaches. We want them to be close together and close to the venue. The IETF has had experience with places where the hotels were on one side of the city and the venue was another, and that was a bit of a fracas. It was a great facility. It's just, we wish it was closer together. We try to make sure that we can put at least a third of the people each night in the main hotel. Sometimes we can't achieve that, but we really try at that. We try to have low budget opportunities around the hotel. Available then for people that are on a budget, and obviously the disabilities things comes in on the hotels as well. Now, food and beverage, what we're talking about, I'm sorry, time, oops, okay, it's 4:48, okay. So food and beverage, we're talking about the coffee and cookies and whatever. I noticed this time we had carrots and celery, and that was kind of nice to have a little bit nicer stuff. We would really like to be able to have a grocery store in the area. Mary Barn has made quite a point of that. I wish that we could make that mandatory. That turned out to be an issue that there's a lot of places we wouldn't have been able to go if we had to be right next door to a grocery store. So we try to make it close where we can. The timeline that we go through in selecting a venue, as I started on earlier, about 4 years out, we talk with the IAOC, they pick continents and so on and so forth, and we start the process of investigating cities and venues and these other things. We take a site qualification visit. We go and actually walk the place and see how far A is from B. And sometimes the walking distance is quite a bit different than what it looks like on a map. So, we check and make sure things are right. And we start preliminary negotiations. Those negotiations, depending on location and the facility we're talking with, sometimes go reasonably quickly. Sometimes they take a really long time. And we have people that do an excellent job of negotiating and trying to get things done. Now, on this point, I want to make a comment, and that is that our experience to date is that it's very difficult to do the negotiations in Asia and Latin America. And reason being that they tend to want to sign contracts later, where Europe and North America thinks in terms of 3 or 4 years out. In Asia, they might prefer that it was a year out or a year and a half. So that process of contracting can take quite a bit longer and can be quite a bit more difficult for us. So now what I've just done is I've walked through section 3 of the document. And now like I say, when we first went through this, I would hear a gasp on the phone each time we made a comment. And so then I asked Laura Nugent from the Secretariat if she would be so kind as to take a look and tell us how crazy we were. And Laura, would you come up here, please? So she did a big spreadsheet and looked at the meetings from IETF 74, which is a number of years in the past, through IETF 100, which is several in the future. And I'm trying to hand you the mic, Laura. So I'm gonna. You want to drive?
You can drive.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, I'm Laura. And as Fred just mentioned, I provide a lot of information to the meetings committee in the IOC that hopefully helps them make decisions. And for the purpose of this document, I put together a spreadsheet that looked at each of the criteria that had been identified, and then how it would have impacted one of the meetings we'd had in the past or had contracted through IETF 99, basically, or 100, although we didn't have that finalized. So this is a summary of the criteria that Fred just went through. And you'll see that beside each one, there's an M for mandatory or a D for desirable. And this is how the document currently reads, I believe. So the impact of applying the different criteria that were mandatory, and there were a few new ones that we added in to what we'd been doing previously, resulted in the following meetings actually would not qualify today based on the new criteria. Hiroshima, because they didn't have enough guest rooms in the main hotel. Maastricht, for the same reason. Beijing, for that reason, as well as challenges that we had with nearby affordable overflow hotels. The Orlando Caribe Royale, because of the overflow issue. And the Buenos Aires Hilton, this hotel here, because of the guest room issue and because of the guest room issue.
So you can actually see it here. You don't have to bring your phone.
So then we looked at if we made all the criteria mandatory, what would happen? And there were a number of other venues that would not have actually qualified, places we'd been and had successful meetings in the past. And those include the Convention Center in Stockholm, the Convention Center in Quebec City, the Convention Center in Paris, and the Pacifico Convention Center in Yokohama, for the reasons it says there. So in addition, when we're doing the negotiations and considering the venues that we're going to bring forward for a meeting, we actually work pretty hard to try to keep the guest room rates down. That's really very important and very key in the negotiations. So between IETF 74 and 100, which is 27 meetings, I believe, we've had a range of guest room rates in US dollars between $143 and $249 a night. 18 of those have been below $200 a night, and 9 of those that were below $200 a night actually included breakfast as well. And then this is a list of the properties we've been to between the San Francisco meeting, IETF 74 in 2009, and the IETF 100, where we've paid guest room rates over $200 a night. So in addition to trying to keep the guest room rates down, we also work pretty hard to try to keep the meeting space costs down and the other costs, because those, of course, impact things like the registration costs, the amount of money ISOC has to put in, the amount of money that hosts put up and where that goes. So we do work very hard to try to get the lowest rates we can for all of these things, and we never, ever trade off the cost of the meeting space and make the guest room rates more expensive. That's something that never happens. We're always working to keep the guest room rates low. Yeah, and the last item had to do with the cost of meeting space, and there are 3 exceptional situations there. Those are very expensive meeting space situations that we've paid over the past few years.
So do you want to step in on that? Okay, so thank you. So what we've done now, we've kind of walked through the document quickly. We've walked through the document quickly. We've talked through Laura's analysis. There was one thing that came out of Laura's analysis that we managed to not capture in the slides, and that was that there was one thing that we actually changed from mandatory to desirable. It tells you something about, we really thought it was important, and at the same time we recognized that based on our historical track record, we were not able to achieve it. And that was the question of having a grocery store. You know, we'd like to be near one, but we can't guarantee it. It's just really hard. So at any rate, let me come back to comments that were made on the list and kind of walk through those considerations. And then I'm going to just throw the floor open and ask you for your comments. So the discussion that we've had on the list to date, we've had 2 comments. One of them, we had an individual say that he really wished that we could manage to not pick locations like ICANN did, that were on the backside of the Amazon and had to be gotten through to with a backpack or something like that. And what can I say? We agree with him. At the same time, just our demographics require us to rotate through the continental schedule that the ISG has given us. And as I said, the chair has the option of inserting a meeting in our schedule. And, you know, obviously we're going to work with the chair on getting that insertion to be a reasonable thing to do. So we've actually been looking at having a Latin America meeting now for several years because Yari wanted to come to Latin America. We did an analysis at one point of coming to Brazil. We did site surveys in Brazil and basically decided that nobody had that much money, and that the crime rate in some of the cities that we looked at were not acceptable. So yeah, we're going to insert meetings when the chair asks us to, but we do try to make that be a reasonable thing. Does anybody have a further comment on that point? No. Okay. We also had an additional comment. This came from within the meetings committee, or actually it came from an IAOC member, that one of the things that we'd like to do is we need to rely on the Internet Society for funding. They actually provide, as was detailed in the plenary last night, they provide a fair amount of the funding that we spend. But if we could spend less, they'd like it, and we try to work with them on that. So we'd like to have a host. Hosts help with costs. We'd like to keep the fees down. That helps with costs. Okay. So we want to be able to generate funds from our operations in order to support the Secretariat, the IASA, the web services that we put up, the RFC editor, and basically make the crank turn here. And of course, that affects the meeting fee. Why does the meeting fee go up? Well, when we're not generating enough revenue, that is where we get forced to kind of go look. So does anybody have a further comment on funding? Don.
Do you think there's any significant problem with attendees going to non-participating hotels? Just to point out that IEEE 802 these days announces a registration fee and that you get a $300 discount off the registration fee if you stay in one of the participating hotels, which induces more people to do so, one would think.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. Yeah, so I don't see that in our future, that our headquarters hotels, it's a bit of science and art in selecting the room number that we're going to have in our block, 600 on peak, 400 on peak, that kind of a thing. And it really depends upon what the competition might be locally. So I don't see that we're going to charge an additional fee if you don't stay in the headquarters hotel.
One thing we do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we do this. For this meeting, I did not stay. I did not sign up for a hotel through the IETF website. I went through my company website because I've got a lower price. However, we then collect up that information, and even though I came in on a corporate thing, that counts against our room block. So we didn't have to pay a room block fee. Am I correct on that?
We don't have, we have a contract with the, let's say, the headquarters hotel, in which we have liability if we don't make our numbers. Typically in the overflow hotels, the purpose of getting overflow hotels is to see if we can't drive a good bargain and get good quality terms and conditions for the attendees. There's no liability involved if we don't make the number. So we're not too concerned about that part. We're just trying to drive a good deal. Now, for Buenos Aires, where the hotels are small, we have a headquarters hotel with only 350 rooms, but we have hotel contracts with 10 hotels for this area. I tell you, it's a lot of work negotiating hotel contracts, especially in a culture and in a country in which you've not done business before.
So, okay, thank you. Any further? Yeah. Okay, so Yari's telling me to move along. So hotels, we had a comment on the list that I said that I wanted to have a third of our rooms in the headquarters hotel, and the comment came back, could you please make that half or 2/3 or twice as many as we need, or pick some other number. The problem that we have with that is places like Buenos Aires, where the hotels are relatively small. So what we've chosen to focus on there is success, and certainly if we can get a larger hotel, we like it, but that's not something we are going to walk away from deal over.
So if I could elaborate on that a little bit, and that's this, and I get the message, we heard what you had to say with 2 hotels back to back, Yokohama and here, with like 350 rooms. That's not satisfactory. If we were going to an island and there one hotel, I'd book 1,200 rooms. Okay, but if we're in what we're trying to do is book 780 rooms on peak, and so what that means, that's like 4,500 room nights. That's the goal, so that we get a significant percentage of the people in a good favorable contracting provision. But if we're in Anaheim, where we're surrounded by hotels in very close proximity with much cheaper hotel rates, we're not likely to book at the 600 level because people will opt for the neighboring hotels at lower rates.
Okay, so Back, Mike?
Kyle Rose. So it seems, this may be just my perception and it may not be reality, but 2 out of the last 3 meetings, it seemed like we went out of our way to book hotels that were not near any other hotels. And so, I mean, I can understand not being able to find hotels that can hold 1,300 people. That seems reasonable. But it might be nice if the host hotel were near other hotels so that you don't have to walk a mile each way whenever you want to go back to your room.
We agree with that goal.
Okay, Alia?
Alia Ellis. So I agree on the increasing the number of rooms. I think that we are also created a bad feedback situation where, because there aren't a lot of rooms in the main hotel, people come and book even if they're not sure they're coming. And one of the ways of dampening that behavior might be looking at what the criteria are, because it's frankly not clear to me at this point that even if we booked 100% of the rooms at the IETF venue hotel for all of the had the space for all of the participants, that we wouldn't run out because people reserve and then have travel plan changes. So I think there's going to be some we need to do some dampening on that issue.
So Alia, I want to know what you'd like me to do about that.
Frankly, non-refundable for maybe half a room or some cost, however minor, that makes it annoying to have booked and basically grab and then give away. And I know that sounds mean, but that's a solution I see, but this is not my expertise. So I see the problem, not necessarily all the solutions that.
We try to get the best cancellation fee provisions that we can get. In some hotels, it's, you can cancel within 3 days and only pay 1 room night. Other hotels, you have to cancel 2 weeks out and you pay the entire block. And so it's a difficult situation. Randy?
Randy?
My hotel room has brown carpet, and some of the tones are a little annoying. I really think we ought to fix that.
We'll take care of that.
Do I
What's your
need
room
to
number?
translate this for you? We have a serious problem, and we're being drowned in detail. Can we address the serious problems we have?
Back, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the travel policy. If you had a non-refundable startup at the reservation, my company at least would never reserve using the IETF. Yeah, I was just wanted to go back to the travel policy about non-refundable versus refundable reservations. If we had a flat-out non-refundable rate, my company at least would never use the IETF room block, ever.
Corinne Kat, trying to get this back to the important issues. Can somebody please explain how accessibility to people who are not able-bodied is under the desirable rubric and not under the mandatory rubric? Especially as a lot of the participants come from countries where under their laws that would never fly, where having a conference venue means that it's accessible for people with all sorts of different needs, and that's something we need to be addressing here.
It's hard to follow that. But I wanted to go back to the non-refundable thing for a second. I don't think that's the right way to incent people not to get rooms. The right way to incent people not to get rooms is to make it so that there isn't such a huge advantage to being in the host hotel. There is right now a huge advantage to being in the host hotel versus any other hotel. So have more hotel rooms close by. Sorry, the question was, how do you do that?
Yeah. So I need to cap the mics at this point. We're within 10 minutes of the next meeting starting in this room.
Nope, nobody's saying their names, which is, I find interesting here. So I, including
So what was your name?
Mark Nottingham. I don't even have a name tag. Yes, I'm a bad man. I have observed this process over the years and all the complaining that goes on about it, about the distance of travel and about the hotels and about the food and about the this and that. And I don't want to minimize those complaints because there are some concerns there, but they're largely administrative concerns. I think that the IAOC works within the constraints it has. It has a very difficult job. We're not the only conference in the world. People know how to plan conferences. These are largely administrative things, and you make a lot of trade-offs, and that's the best you can do. And that's fine. I won't complain about the fact that I have to fly halfway around the world every time this happens, because everybody knows that's what I complain about. I think there are much weightier issues that should be discussed. And I would suggest that this effort be refocused around them.
Okay, Olaf?
Olaf Kolkman, Internet Society. Perhaps along the same lines, the document reads like a protocol description that ends up in walk away or stay. It doesn't address really how the considerations that are being described are accounted for. I think that part of the discussion is perhaps the most important one. How does the IAOC, when considering these issues and prioritizing them, accounts for the fact that they made certain decisions? I think that is the question that is on the table at this moment, and then we can go into what are the important features here, what are the priorities, how do you go about doing that? Don't write a protocol doc now that leads to a decision when you're not quite sure on how you're going to evaluate the result of all this.
Barbara?
So, first of all, yes, I think accessibility should simply be mandatory,
And
especially
you,
since
last I checked, were Barbara Stark, right?
Barbara Stark, since the assessment showed that there were no issues with accessibility, it's a no-brainer to make it mandatory. The other thing is, just as an alternate proposal to consider, don't give them the link to make the lodging reservation until they've paid their IETF fee, because personally, I don't pay my IETF fee until I've gotten approval for travel.
Okay. Gary?
Yaryak, so first of all, the point of order, it's 20 minutes until the next session begins and 10 minutes until our session ends. So I think we actually might have some time for more comments. Community input is important. The thing that I wanted to say is that this, reading the various comments that we've gotten, it is actually I mean, we will obviously need feedback on these criteria. That's a very important thing that we started doing that. But there's another category of feedback that suggests that maybe some more sort of crowdsourcing or providing ability for at least some community members to see some things into this process would actually help catch some issues in. And I'm saying this by wearing my mistake-making IOC dot. So that might be one thing to consider as well, us making these requirements.
Okay, so, okay, here's my boss. Oli, go ahead. I have capped the mic, please.
I just want to make one observation about an underlying problem that causes a lot of this, which is that the nature of our meetings are changing. The number of meeting rooms that we need has increased significantly since we started doing this. And that is slowly but surely forcing us into convention centers. And in some parts of the world, convention centers sit next to really big hotels, sometimes with one on each side, but sometimes they don't. In Dublin, for example, there are no next door hotels, but it is a wonderful convention center. And all of the hotels, or many of the hotels, are less than 10 minutes or 5 minutes even walk away. So if we could maybe change some of our expectations, some of these problems would go away. I know all of the benefits of being under one roof and sitting in one bar at that night, but unfortunately, the reality is forcing us into that situation.
Okay. So, I'm sorry?
We have 10 minutes more here.
We have 10 minutes more. Okay. So at this point, what I want to do is open up the thing. Before I actually do that, I want to point out some text that I picked up, and this is from the event last night and the discussion that the various and sundry have had during the day. We obviously missed checking a data point, and we need to check the data point. So Randy, you have been channeling John. You want to talk about transparency issues. This is your turn. And in general, I want to talk about issues. Let's talk about issues.
Issue, I don't even know you. Randy Bush, IJ, channeling John Clenson. I know it's a shock, but actually he and I go way back. I think what's been suggested on list to throw out, hey, over the next 5 years, we're looking at all these places, does no damage to your contracting ability, and in fact, maybe enhances it because you can say, hey, you're competing with these boys and girls, and gives people from the community to help you not step in the cow pie you stepped in Singapore. As far as Singapore goes, I think instead of digging a deeper and deeper hole, just say, we made a boo-boo. We're trying to figure out how to fix it. And
I opened up the meeting with that statement.
I heard you, but certainly that wasn't what happened last night.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you need a big sign above last night. When you're in a hole, stop digging. Okay? So you got to clean up the mess, and first you got to do the due diligence and find out how much of a mess there actually
So Randy,
is.
you're preaching to the choir on that one.
Well, I'm very sorry.
Oh, okay. So we only have a few minutes. I want to give a lot of people opportunity to talk. So John?
The situation in Singapore about gay rights is...
Say your name, please.
Oh, sorry, I'm John
Stephanie's
Levine.
taking notes.
Sorry, I'm John Levine. The situation is deeply ambiguous. There's no question that there are antique laws against gay sex. You know, on the other hand, the government has stated to the UN that it's a great place to be gay, and they have gay politicians, and they had 28,000 people at a gay rights event last year. And I'm not drawing any conclusions from this, but I guess I'm wondering, you know, and this is basically what you've been talking about, is how are we going to bring this information into future venue selections, and particularly as we move outside of our traditional sites in North America and Europe. Like if we're looking for a venue in the Middle East, I mean, the number that are gay friendly are basically none, you know. And in Southeast Asia, there are other countries that are way worse than Singapore. So while I agree this is an important issue, I mean, it's like, as I was saying to Ray, there's all sorts of stuff we have to trade off, and I think Singapore was probably a mistake. You know, it might make sense to move to Hong Kong or something, but I'm more interested in seeing what the process is than in seeing us rend our shirts.
Thank you. I'm trying to think. Nalina, I think you're next.
Okay, Nalini Elkins. I wanted to say maybe something a little bit more similar to what he was saying. There are 79 countries and 8 or 10 states in the United States that have laws that make homosexuality criminal. And please do not think that I, a woman of color working in technology, am insensitive to discrimination. That would be a mistake. So, having said that, this is a very nuanced problem. Some of the largest countries in the world, from where we are getting many contributors and hope to get many, many more, are located in such countries. And to give some perspective, we have a hard time changing equipment in the internet after having the internet be around for what, 30, 40 years, maybe less in some areas. Some of our cultures have been cultures for 3, 4, 5,000 years. No, it's not easy for us to change. We're trying. And as I say, I speak as a bicultural person from one of these countries who unfortunately has these horrible laws on their books. I would hate to see that be a criteria to militate against choosing that incredibly wonderful country and region of the world. Thank you.
Pete?
Pete Resnick, and I'm not going to speak to any particular country, but just by way of how we might do this. The document gives a list of criteria. But I think another axis which probably isn't in there is some of the criteria may be in principle mandatory in a different kind of way. That there are some things that are on your mandatory or important list, as you said, which are weighable, and then some things which are no-go. Coming up with a list of no-goes is going to be really, really hard. It's fraught. There's just no way around that fact. And to give random examples, it may or may not be the case that no-go might be a place where you must wear a particular kind of religious garb if you are a particular gender or a particular sort of person. That might be no-go, and reasonably so, and does not fit any of the categories really. You might say inclusiveness. You don't want to go down the path of saying, well, you could come if you wore the right thing. I think there are going to be a list of those categories, and they're going to be really hard for you guys to navigate. But I think it's a conversation that you have to have with the community to sort of get to, okay, what is that list? Only slightly veering into the particular example. It may be the case that the list includes, if traveling there with my child makes it possible that if I am injured, my spouse cannot care for that child because for whatever reason, they won't be given access. That might be a no-go. And different sorts of laws may make the no-go list and different may miss the no-go list. And it's going to be a dynamic process. Dave Crocker said last night, well, if there are certain kinds of things, certain kinds of places we can't go, we need the list. That's not a list of places, that's a list of these sort of no-go criteria. And it's going to be hard and there's no way out.
Thanks for the insight. Appreciate it.
Okay, Elliot?
Elliot Lear. So in listening to Pete and in listening to Olaf and others, I begin to wonder whether this is the right approach, that of having no-goes at all or having mandatories at all. And the thing that I'm thinking about is that we appoint from the community the IAOC to use good judgment, but they do need help from the community, and there are so many variables that trying to mix them all in is a complex task. But the community can help. We have the technology. We could have an approach in which, if you guys can at least let us know the sorts of cities you're thinking about, the community can chime in and say, here are some of the issues that we see with those communities, with those cities. So it could be a wiki with a table. Pick your favorite approach. I'm technology agnostic, but I know that I could whip this up on a wiki myself in about 20 minutes. It won't be as pretty as, say, some other mechanism, But I think the, mandatory, what have you, I would rather leave that to you guys to mix in and to use your judgment based on the community input that you're getting for specific cities. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
I'm Dhruv. So as an openly gay person living in one of those countries with these laws on the books, I think the parameter that we need to also feel how that laws are applied, which is, as Nalini said, we have to look at, am I running away from those countries? I'm staying on, fighting for the rights, and I would like IETF support to do that rather than just having a blanket rule that we will never go to any country where such laws exist. I think we have to compare. There is a scale. Comparing Uganda, where things are really bad, and comparing it to Singapore, we have to do that. We cannot do it one blank slate. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dave Crocker's in Mead Echo.
Hi there. So I wanted to respond. Just a second. Let me mute. Oh, that's not going to work. I wanted to respond to Pete. The proposal that we specify a collection of criteria for deciding on whether a venue is accessible, as opposed to presenting possibilities to the community and letting the community decide, in my view, is completely unworkable and will ensure that we have more of the kind of problems we encountered last night. The complexity of these kinds of choices, the variability over time, the subtlety of community reactions means that if you allow some other group like the IOC or the meetings committee to make the choice, it will always eventually get it wrong.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I have 2 people at the mic and 3 minutes. Please be quick.
Yeah, Ron Schiffer. So I do agree with that we need criteria. I think when we define these criteria, we should not get it too wide. Inclusiveness is critical, is key. So accessibility for the disabled, I think, should be on the left-hand side, the important side, or mandatory or whatever. However, being able to travel with my child or with my spouse, or going to a place that I like for various reasons, ideological or otherwise, should not be on the list. So inclusiveness, make sure that we are allowed to be there and to be there legally, of course, but no more than that.
Aaliyah, you're the last one.
Just what I wanted. So 2 things. One, I agree with Dave Crocker. We come from a lot of different cultures and have a lot of different perspectives and opinions, but we're all trying to make the internet better. I don't think trying to tear the community apart, discussing exactly which types of identity are the most critical things to protect and what's really respected in one place or another, or what laws are done, is a healthy place to go. But the higher piece of this is, I do feel that we need to have more opinions and perspectives, both of the general what are the cities, but also probably on the meetings committee. And that's some of the point, is frankly to have more perspectives coming in, more rotation, and some accountability. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So we're adjourned.
Thank you. We're done. I'm sorry for taking too long here. For the next guys, we will be addressing the Singapore issue in the IOC. Stay tuned. And separately, we will be pursuing the requirements and this discussion we just had. Thank you.